to The Alex Jones Show. Live from Austin, Texas, broadcasting worldwide, it's Alex Jones.
Towards the end of his term, there was a raid by local state officials in a California state prosecution, county prosecution, of the son of a famous science fiction writer, Mr. Asimov. When they did their raid, they found not only what appeared to be child pornography, but also the ability to make and create child pornography. These stories started leaking out to the local press by the police officers, who were shocked and horrified by what they saw. Within about a year and a half, 2 years, suddenly, all of a sudden, the feds swoop in, and Mr. Mueller takes over the case. He will wait about a year or so until the case quietly dies. Mr. Asimov will see no time in a federal prison. He'll have his own equipment and everything returned to him. Within a couple of months of that deal getting done, Mr. Mueller had a new nomination. He was made the FBI director under George W. Bush.
It is my honor to nominate Robert S. Mueller of California to become the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation.
In fact, he was made FBI director very soon before the next big deep state scandal would occur, 9/11. So there had been suspicion and some theories for some time that Mr. Mueller used Mr. Asimov to gain access to names of identities of individuals who were high profile and politically connected, who had been involved in either the production or purchase of child pornography. Whether it's true or not is still unknown because it was never fully investigated or vetted. The congressional committees that oversaw Mr. Mueller's appointment to the FBI chose not to ask a single question about it. Once Mr. Mueller got to the FBI, within weeks, 9/11 occurs. What is Mr. Mueller's first action and reaction? As is well documented in stories like the Looming Tower and others, the ground agent of the FBI was giving notice to their hierarchy that there were serious problems afoot, including, in fact, key-ranking members of the FBI's anti-terrorism division were reporting serious concerns. The FBI ignored those concerns on the 7th floor of their political hierarchy. So there were FBI agents warning about people learning to only take off on planes and not land, people who were using FBI informants in San Diego and Southern California who would end up being one of the 21 pilots or people involved in the terror events of 9/11, or at least alleged or accused to be. And in addition to that, there was concerns about all of bin Laden's connections, family and political and financial connections, of people that were here in the United States at the time of 9/11. What did Robert Mueller do? Well, first, he helped many of the key people that were connected to the Saudis and connected to the bin Laden family to escape the United States without any meaningful investigation into them, with secret flights out during a time period in which no flights were actually supposed to be allowed at all, least of all for potential suspects or persons of interest with knowledge and information that could be relevant and significant to the investigation into what actually happened at 9/11. But it went beyond that. Mr. Mueller did a massive cover-up campaign to make sure that nobody would find out for almost a decade that the FBI's ground-level agents, their field agents, had been documenting and detailing concerns that the 7th floor had stayed quiet and mute about. Indeed, one of the key FBI agents who was documenting problems was the head of security at the World Trade Center and died that day. So much of his information went with him. And Robert Mueller would spend the next better part of a half a decade covering up what he knew and other people knew that the FBI didn't act upon for political reasons or unexplained reasons.
Mueller has confronted this mounting evidence, and he's candidly admitted what we all now realize, that today we can't say for sure whether the 9/11 attacks might have been stopped if all the dots had been connected and all the leads been followed. And I commend the director for the candor of his recent statements.
That would not be the end of Robert Mueller's role as a deep state fix-it man. He would not only be an FBI director under George W. Bush, Barack Obama would continue the bipartisan role of Robert Mueller as a deep state fix-it man and allow him to continue on as FBI director even after he took over. During this time period, Robert Mueller would take critical steps to cover up anything that could implicate high-ranking members of the FBI, our law enforcement or intelligence branches, or what is loosely
as a member of Congress, when I was the chairman of the Oversight Committee, I had the Secret Service, more than 40 agents dove into my background because they wanted to embarrass me.
And this has become a super authority that now has more power than the President of the United States, not envisioned by the Constitution in any way, shape, or form. Why the hell should we put up with it?
Had someone come to me a year ago and said this is what we would be dealing with now, I really would have thought of it as a conspiracy theory. But what we have seen take place over the last 18 months in the federal bureaucracy has been nothing short of a wholesale repudiation of the election and an effort by entrenched bureaucrats to overturn it.
The people in the deep state, they do not like transparency. They don't want accountability. They don't want to be called on the mat. And when a disruptive personality like Donald Trump and his team come along, they want to flee. They don't like the sunshine. They don't like that.
Are there forces in the United States that are more powerful than Congress? More powerful than the President of the United States, more powerful than the President and the Congress combined?
To get in the leadership, it's not, you don't earn your stripes. That was one thing that I had made a decision even before I went to Washington. And while I was there, if I had set my goal as to become chairman of the banking committee, I would have had to sell my soul, really. And I said, wait, you do exactly what they tell you. You raise a lot of money, and it costs a couple million. Now it's probably $5 or $10 million to deliver to the party, and you have to do that by kowtowing to the powerful special interests, mainly the military-industrial complex.
The term the deep state would in fact originate from an 1860s, 1870s economist writer who simply called it the dual state, trying to explain the phenomenon to where democratic forces had less and less control over the day-to-day operations of government. At that point, it was sort of loosely or colloquially called the administrative state. But in its law enforcement and intelligence branches, where people were obtaining power and unable to be removed or their policies changed no matter what happened in the elections, led to the phrase deep state. It would be popularized and colloquialized again by a group of scholars from Germany in the early 1930s who were trying to explain the rise of fascism. They began to understand what fascism was about and where it came from, based on this dual state notion, that increasingly there are people who controlled military, law enforcement, and intelligence branches of government that were immune from democratic forces, that were removed from the democratic process, that they stayed, like J. Edgar Hoover, no matter what happened politically, no matter who controlled the House, who controlled the Senate, who controlled the Parliament, who controlled the presidency of any government or the prime minister of any government, that in each case and in every case, the political powers that be that control the equivalents of the CIA, whether here or overseas, the high-ranking Defense Department individuals, the high-ranking law enforcement people that should have been political appointees and subject to the political process, were increasingly their own government. Hence the dual state notion, another state outside of, independent of, separate from the democratically controlled political process. And that became known as the deep state in the late 60s and early 70s, originally an idea initiated and brought about by the political left to try to explain the way Hoover was able to operate independent of political process, the way the CIA was able to do coups or MK Ultra independent of and separate from the political process, and whether that political process is the press and public knowledge, or the political process is the legislative bodies that were supposed to be controlling their funding and overseeing them, or the executive branch and the elected head of the executive branch themselves. There's a reason why a general like Eisenhower voiced his concerns in 1959. He was witnessing the dual state, the deep state in action that was so powerful that even a general, former general, and a president of the United States felt he could no longer control them, that he needed the public to be aware of their activities so there could be more electoral and democratic, little d, democratic control of the dual state, deep state operation that was entrenching and institutionalizing its political power, using its control over the intelligence infrastructure, the military infrastructure, and the law enforcement infrastructure, and the blackmail and extortion files that they were able to acquire and acquisition through that in order to achieve and obtain their power and to keep and protect and preserve that power at all costs. Mr. Mueller understood the deep state, had been its key advocate, had been its key protector, had been its key enabler throughout his entire political career. The family heritage that he inherited of protecting privilege and power was extended to the dual state and the deep state during his tenure, both as a prosecutor and as FBI director. So when he is FBI director, not only is he involved in issues related to 9/11 cover-up of FBI whistleblower activity that was suppressed by the 7th floor hierarchy, but in addition to that, he will later protect the second level of bank money laundering allegations for rogue states, for drug dealers, for people running arms, for people running drugs, and that would be the HSBC case. So HSBC would come under scrutiny because it was the bank of choice for Mexican drug cartels and the bank of choice for various terror running operations.